This is your 20-minute podcast, where we do our best to give you useful information in 20 minutes or less. Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/your 20-minute podcast. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Now, here's your host, David Brower.
This is David Brower with your 20-minute podcast, and our special guest is Neville Johnson from Hollywood, California. He's a Coach Wooden leadership expert and Hollywood power lawyer. And Mr. Johnson, how are you today?
I'm wonderful, thank you.
You bet. Good to have you here. I've been a big fan of John Wooden since way back in the day. We might even be similar in age, and he certainly has an influence on a lot of people in a lot of places outside of basketball, doesn't he?
Absolutely. Remarkable guy.
No kidding. So your two books, the John Wooden Pyramid of Success and Woodenisms, the wisdom of sayings of famed basketball coach John Wooden. Tell me how you got inspired by John and how you got into writing these books.
Well, many years ago, I had achieved what I wanted to achieve as a lawyer, which was represent the biggest act in rock and roll, and that was John Lennon. And I was the lawyer for the estate of John Lennon and Yoko Ono. And I saw this thing on somebody's wall that said, the Pyramid of Success. I said, who did that? And they said, it was John Wooden. I said, the basketball coach? And I thought to myself, that's what success really is, what he had to say, which was that success, peace of mind, which is a direct result of self-satisfaction and knowing you've made the effort to become your best. So I decided to track him down, and I wanted to get to know him, so I went out to have a conversation with him about it. And then I said, I want to interview you. And he said, okay. And I went out and I interviewed him. And then I said, I want to write a book about this. He said, no, my wife is sick. So I wrote some chapters anyway, and I sent them to him, and they came back redlined a month later.
I'll be darned.
That's how it all started.
Wow, what a gift just to be able to sit down and visit with such an icon.
Can you imagine? He just let me into his living room and chat.
Wow, that's I got goosebumps on that one, man. That's pretty special. I've been thinking about him for the last few days for some reason. I think it's probably because of the Sweet 16 and getting down to the Final Four, and when Lou Alcindor, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was playing for him, and they took away the block shot because of him back in '67, and then finally let it back in '76. But and Bill Walton, I've been a big fan of his for a long time, and so people that have been touched by John Wooden are just innumerable.
Yeah, he had a tremendous influence and popularity when he was a coach, and I think even more so since he retired. And it just goes to show you that that old adage that there's no second act life or whatever is not true, because he went on to have a great life. Absolutely right.
And when a legacy is left behind like that, it goes far beyond coaching. And like you're saying, the Pyramid of Success, a lot of people have used that pyramid to their own success, haven't they?
Well, it's taken on a life of its own, and it has extreme popularity, and it can be used by anybody, anywhere, anytime. One of the things that attracted me to it was that it is non-sectarian, it's just good common sense, and has all the principles that we should have to live a productive and good life. And the key ingredients are industriousness and enthusiasm. He says, there's no substitute for work, and you should love what you do, and you should go after a great and difficult challenge. He calls it competitive greatness. And I think that that's something we should all be take to heart. I asked him one time, well, what about people who are in a job they don't like? He says, well, they should do as soon as they can. They should get to the position they want to be.
Yeah.
Overall.
It's so hard to do that, when you feel mired down in a job or in a career, and then your gut tells you I got to go somewhere else, and oftentimes people just don't have the wherewithal to make that happen.
Yeah, but I'm a great believer in destiny, hard work, and going for what you want. And he says if you have a realistic goal, you should go and try and achieve it. And that's what it's all about.
Making the effort, having your eye on the ball. Pun intended, and making the effort to go after it. And that Pyramid of Success can help you do that, right?
Yes. And it works in business, it works in life. It works in all aspects of the human condition. You know, he was just such a wonderful philosopher who said things like, the most important words in the English language is love followed by balance. I mean, imagine a basketball coach saying that.
How simple is that, right? We tend to overthink things and make things much more complicated than they need to be. And if you can focus on love and balance, my goodness, you can do a lot of things in your life.
Right. And then he says things like, why is it so difficult to realize at times that nothing we can do will change the past, and the only way to affect the future is by what we do now? You know, he has all these wonderful, simple aphorisms. Like he says, there are no secrets. It is studying and learning all you can from all those with whom you come in contact. And that is not only for other coaches, but all others. And he says, the ideal level of motivation is nothing other than consistent preparation and execution that starts the first day of practice and is maintained at a constant level throughout the basketball season. So he lived it. That was the beautiful thing about him. He lived it. And the reason he's so great, although younger people were not around at the time, was he has a collection of what I call not only unequaled, but unapproachable records. I mean, 7 national championships in a row, 10 out of 12 years, 3 perfect seasons. It's like, come on.
Yeah, you look up philosophy, consistency, and integrity in the dictionary, and there's Coach Wooden in all 3 pages, right?
Yeah, no. And you know, I did my best because I'm a lawyer to go and find. That's what my job is, to go find the faults in other people so I can win the case.
Yeah.
And so I did everything I could to find it. The Coach Wooden is a saint. He was just a wonderful, wonderful, very kind person who treated everybody with respect and dignity, and kept it all in perspective. In other words, he was so devoted to his wife and so happy as a family man. And yes, he enjoyed being a coach and all the rest of that stuff, but he didn't, you know, he went on to have a great life after it was time for him to retire. And so that gives great hope to anybody out there who is going to be making some sort of a life change, is that the world doesn't end just because you don't measure your life just by what you did for a job, you know.
That is absolutely correct. And balance, I tell you, love and balance really makes a lot of sense to a lot of people if they stop and think about it, whether it's professionally or personally.
Yeah, and he was, another thing about him was that he was a great teacher, a coach of his students, and afterwards he was an incredible friend and mentor. So he kept in touch with all of his players over the years. He knew where almost everybody was and had a great time with them overall. But he knew when he had to be the teacher and the coach, and he knew when he could change into becoming their friend. And so it's a lesson for anybody who is a mentor or a mentee of how a relationship can work. And here he had 180 or so players from UCLA who he stayed in touch with his whole life.
And he could probably name their family members by name and know everything about them all at the same time.
That's so true. And, you know, I interviewed guys that didn't play so much, as well as the stars. I interviewed the managers of the teams. He touched everybody he came into contact with. And he was a humble man, but in the sense that he wasn't a braggadocio. But he had a really good time. And what people don't realize is how humorous he was. Very, very funny sense of humor, and also how educated he was. He had gotten a graduate degree in English and poetry in particular, and was a poet himself. He also was said to me, I took so many courses in psychology, I could have had a degree.
Wow. That's fascinating. Your follow-up book, The Woodenism, so is that exactly what it says?
Yeah.
Is it just filled with his one-liners?
It is. It's filled with a bunch of them. Failing to prepare is preparing to fail is one of his famous ones.
Yeah.
And the star is the rest of the team, and the softest pillow is a clear conscience. And the athlete who says something cannot be done should never interrupt the athlete who is doing it, and a bunch of others that are just so great.
Wow.
The true athlete should have character, not be a character. And, you know, when I sent him the book originally, I had transcribed his lecture on the pyramid, and he wrote back as the last line, your reputation is what others think you are. Your character is what you really are.
Love that.
And, That was a pretty good one. Here's what he says about being a good leader. One that doesn't try to be a leader. One that is not lost in himself, not consumed with himself, that's not a dictator. One that is interested in finding about the best way to accomplish things rather than having his own way. One that makes every effort to make those under his supervision know that they are working with him to accomplish in the end rather than working for him. I think if you have someone working for you, they'll just put in hours and punch the clock, and that's it.
Yeah, absolutely right. And again, that philosophy carries over personal life, professional life, basketball, attorney, radio broadcaster. Doesn't make any difference. If you have love and balance and you're able to articulate some of those things, it can change your life.
Yeah, and he told us, he was very proud of the fact that more than 90% of his players graduated from college, which of course would never happen today because everybody any good goes pro almost immediately. But he always referred to his players as student athletes, and he told them, you came here first for an education and second to play basketball. So it was all about perspective. Another thing he said was never get emotional. Just go out there and play your game. Don't get high after a win. Don't be down after a defeat. And he would, his daughter said, unless you'd been at the game, you wouldn't have known who won.
Wow.
Right.
That's amazing. I still have that. I don't know whether it was a program, a newspaper, what it was, but I just have this vision of him walking up and down the court holding something rolled up in his hand and just kind of slapping it in his other hand. Is that right? Yeah,
that was his program, and he also carried a cross with him in his pocket at all times to keep things going his way.
Coaches are some of the most superstitious people I've ever known. One buddy of mine, he was a coach for a long time, and he used to always wear the same chinos with a penny in the left cuff, and that was just his deal,
Yeah, and he was all about fundamentals at all times, and he said it's all about the practice. I can only do so much during a game. And he was a fierce competitor, and he would, yell during the games at the coaches and all that. But he played fair and square, and he won fair and square, and he kept improving each year. So he went from the full court press to the big man with Kareem, and learned how to have a big man on his team, etc.
Wasn't he quite a player himself back in the day?
Not only quite a player, how about Player of the Year in, I think it was 1930 at Purdue. And one of his teams won the state championship, and also his high school team won the state championship as well. So he was a tremendous player.
So what was your favorite moment with him? There had to be a lot, but did you have a favorite moment?
I think sitting in his living room and just seeing how he lived. I got to see his bedroom, and at the end of his bed was a shrine to his wife who had passed away, and with a love letter that he written to her every month, and that was very touching to see. He really missed her, and he really loved her overall,
Yep, absolutely.
Let's put it this way. He didn't suffer fools gladly. He knew what was going on, and but he was gracious, and I loved seeing and hearing about his innumerable kindnesses to so many. He touched so many people, and I went back to Indiana and met people he'd gone to high school with. In fact, one person said Wooden never said a bad thing about anybody else. And another thing about Wooden that I think is interesting is that he never used the word win, saying we won the game or we beat the other team. He would only say we outscored our opponent.
Wow. That's classic.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it only matters, really, how well you did. I mean, as a lawyer, I'm not going to win every case.
Right.
But if I can feel good about myself if I did my darndest to win.
Absolutely. Integrity was everything with him, huh?
It was. And he was, people really liked him. I'll tell you another thing about him. I grew up in Southern California, and I was here then. Boy, did he have an effect on our culture out here. I mean, we felt, all of us, like winners. I guess that's not a word I should use. We felt good about ourselves. We felt good about ourselves because of the tremendous competence and victories of the teams. It made us all feel really good. And I said in the book that when he retired, it was sort of like the Beatles breaking up. It's, oh no, what are we going to do now? And there really hasn't been anybody like him ever since. Because heroes are hard to find. And we always find some failings with them in some way for so many of them, and that's whether they're athletes or politicians or celebrities of some sort, but not him. He lived up to his reputation.
And my sense is, I lived far, far away from him, but always followed him and his teams, and there was always, even for me, he would just give you a sense of pride, whether you played ball or not.
Yeah, it was, I'll tell you a funny story about him. So, hey, Coach, you know how you said you never swore except when you were 10 years old and your dad boxed your ears? Well, I was talking to a guy who says that in 1932, after a high school game that you coached, you took a swing at the other guy and called him an SOB. And Wooden said, I did take a swing at him. I did not call him an SOB, and I have witnesses.
That's funny.
And then,
my
God.
God.
He was a modest man, and I'm not going to say that this was false modesty, but this you can imagine him saying this with a twinkle in his eye. It's
right?
1975. He has just won his 10th national championship and announced he is retiring. And the press comes up to him and says, well, how do you feel on winning this game? And his response is, well, it's pleasing.
I love it. I absolutely love it. How can folks get your books, Neville?
All right, so the new book is called Woodenisms. It's available at Books A Million and of course from Amazon, which is selling 75% of the books in this country, I understand.
Yep.
And my other book is called The John Wooden Pyramid of Success, second edition, and that's also available from Amazon.
Very good. And do you have a website where they're available too?
Well, I think if you go to cooltitles.com, you'll find information about that. Yeah.
Terrific. Again, the books are The John Wooden Pyramid of Success and Woodenisms. Our guest has been Neville Johnson from Hollywood. Thank you so much for your time and all the love and energy you put into these books, and the opportunity you had to visit with a great man. That just changed your life forever, didn't it?
It did. And thanks so much for talking to me, David.
You're very welcome. You've been listening to your 20-minute podcast with David Brower and our special guest, Neville Johnson. Be sure to follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/your 20-minute podcast.
Until next time, don't forget to download your free audiobook at audibletrial.com/your 20-minute podcast. That's audibletrial.com/your 20-minute podcast for your free audiobook. And thanks for listening to your 20-minute podcast with David Brower.